Coming up, we spend an hour with blind comedian Chris McCausland.
You're listening to Double Time, your daily accessible technology show. Now, here's your hosts, Stephen Scott and Shaun Preece.
It's a special one for us today, Shaun. We get the chance to sit down with someone who has been a long-time listener to this show, but is someone who has become a national treasure in the UK, and that is Chris McCausland. He's the winner of the Strictly Come Dancing show. He's a comedian in his own right. He's just had a film out. He's a great guy, and he joins us right now here on Double Tap. Great to have you on the show, Chris.
Oh, what a pleasure to be here, guys.
It's nice to have you here. I know you two are best chums now. Ooh.
Me and Mike.
Oh, you mean my
Mike.
mate, Chris. That's all I hear.
Clang. Yes, absolutely.
He came to the show the other day, and I said to him, imagine if this is no good, how awkward's the interview going to be when we do that?
Luckily enough, it was fantastic, Chris. Thank you. Yes, you did invite me along, and we got to meet you backstage. It was amazing. Thank you.
Yeah, but you met his partner, didn't you? And she asked some pretty probing. I think she should have done the interview.
Sarah.
Yeah. I mean, she's. I'm trying to think of a nice word for this. I think gobby is the best one I can come up with.
Yes. You know what? We'll take that. I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah. Well, you can't argue with fact, can you?
Yeah,
Chris.
Well,
look,
do you know what though? Do you know what though? Like, I'm just going to butt in here, Stephen, right? Because I, obviously you guys know me from the telly and all that, but I've listened to so much of you guys. I've listened to way more of you guys than you've ever seen of me on the telly, right? So it genuinely is like a joy to be here to talk to you both. And I just want to say, right, that I know how this business works, right? And you guys are so good at making yourselves look bad, right? Now, I just want to get to the just so that everybody knows, like, it's not the disheveled wreck that you guys make out it is. It's a little bit like we had a comedian in this country in the 70s and the 80s called Les Dawson, and he played the piano badly. And in order to play the piano badly well, he had to be a really good pianist, right? So well done for being so good that you can get away with making yourselves look bad.
Yeah. I kind of want to say I'd love to say that's true, but I'm not sure about that one.
I'm taking it. We're the Les Dawson of podcasts. That's a tribute.
That's a tribute. Look, I mean, how's it been for you? I mean, it's a roller coaster, isn't it? Because, of course, the Strictly Come Dancing experience was just, I can only imagine what that was like. I mean, just incredible. And for a lot of people, they got to know you. They got to know the Chris McCausland outside of the comedy. Maybe they hadn't seen you do comedy and they didn't really know much about you at all. And there's always that thing of, you go into these kind of shows and I suppose I feel it, and I don't know if you guys feel it as well. Sometimes you always think, God, I'm only there because I'm blind. I'm the odd one out. So I'll, stand up and be a bit different, and that'll make the series more interesting or whatever. Did you have any fear like that? Did you worry about that when you were going into it?
Yeah, so I said no to them quite a few times, to be honest, because of all that. And also because my attitude's always been to, I mean, obviously I'm my own person and I want to do well and I want to develop my career and I want to be a decent comedian, but also I want to represent well. Do you know what I mean? And I think it's important to show capability, and I think make people forget about disability more than remind them about it. And I think if you can make people forget about disability more than you do that, then you are winning, because that's healthier, I think, for the bigger picture, than people being constantly aware of it. And I thought that going into Strictly, I didn't know if it was something I could do. I thought this could be a disaster. It's dancing on live TV. I couldn't go back and I had no frame of reference as to what it was that was being asked of me. I know what dancing is. I mean, who doesn't know what dancing is? But how good is it? Like, what are they actually doing? How fast are they moving? What are the moves? What are the lifts? I had no idea. And you can't describe it in a way that gets it across to what the level of what is required. And so I just didn't know what I was getting myself into. And I thought, well, if this is a disaster, it does no one any good, does it? Doesn't do anybody like us any good. And it doesn't do me any good, because who wants to go and see a comedian that they feel sorry for? You don't want it to be sympathetic, do you? Because that's the worst for everybody. So I said no a few times, and then people were poking me with a stick, and I allowed myself to think about it. And I do you know what it was? I got to the point where I knew that, as you said, they wanted to. Tick a box is quite a crass statement, isn't it? Because we can. This is why we can contradict ourselves quite a lot. We are guilty of this. Is that we can use phrases like tick a box, but then we can also say there's not enough representation.
Yeah.
So you can't have representation without ticking boxes. So I knew they wanted somebody blind, and because they kept on asking me, and I knew that I was the person they wanted to do it. But I thought, well, if I keep on saying no, they will look somewhere else. And I knew how annoyed I would be if somebody else went on it and did the tiny violin and the sob story and the gentle piano ballad music while they told about the journey of their sight loss, and they made everybody kind of like, I knew I'd be so angry. So I knew I could do it on every other level, with the comedy and the positivity and the and all of that. It's just the dancing that was a problem, which was quite big for a dancing show.
Well, it wasn't that much of a problem because you won it. I mean, How surprised were you by that? And when did you know, actually, I'm not going to go out on the first episode or the second episode. Actually, I've got backing here. I've got support. When did you know that?
Well, the first episode that we did, like the fear I had. I mean, honestly, like I have never been that scared of anything than stood in that studio waiting to go live. So the show is live. It's like there's millions of people watching at home. It's 100% live, but they play a VT before every dance, and so that VT, like a video, like of like you doing the training and all that. People are watching that at home, but you're just stood there waiting in the studio, waiting for the floor manager to go 10 seconds. Like, honestly, I was a shade of grey. That like I was grayer than they made me on the Halloween special when they put makeup on me, and I was terrified because there were so many things in that dance that if they went wrong, it was a showstopper. She had to do a cartwheel, and I had to catch her leg in midair and pull it down and play air guitar, and she'd kicked me in the head 3 times during the training. And we had to do a thing where I swung her under my legs like a helicopter while I stepped over her legs, and I obviously couldn't see them. I was going by the shifts in their body weight and things. So, but if we messed these things up, the whole thing came crashing down. So us getting to the end of that, the relief and the release of that nerves was just, I'd never felt anything like it. And the reaction of the audience and social media went mental. I thought, do you know what? I think we bought ourselves a few brownie points.
Yeah. But there's a point, though. There's a point that comes, though, I think, when people, and this certainly happened to you, and I don't know if you were aware of it, if you were even thinking about it, because I imagine when you're in that moment, you're so busy thinking about just getting through the week, getting through all the dance moves, doing all the stuff you're doing, and then performing on the Saturday night. But what's actually going on outside is a shift. So people are seeing you as Chris the blind guy, but then suddenly they're seeing you be able to dance. And it's like, oh, okay, we're starting to forget a little bit about the blindness. And there's a transitional moment where we start to move away from the blindness. And it's like, God, this Chris guy is really good. And it's that exactly like you're saying. It becomes less about the disability, and it kind of allows people to see what you can do. And you were, I guess, hoping that would happen, but probably didn't imagine it would happen to the extent that it did.
No, I mean, I couldn't have expected that it would have gone anywhere near as good as what it did. I mean, some of the comments we got from the judges, the reaction from the public outside was so phenomenal. And do you know what? It's the most proud of anything I've ever been in my life, because everything I've ever done in comedy has been incremental. So everything is a step on from the last thing. So, we've done loads of stuff. We made a film. I've hosted shows, but it's all within my wheelhouse, and they might be things I've never done before, but they're just a step on from the last thing. Whereas this was like the proverbial frog being dropped in the pan of hot water. And it was so far outside my comfort zone, and to achieve what we did and connect with people the way we did. And it's the most proud of anything I've ever been. And for it to be as emotional as what it was, I didn't expect that. I didn't think dancing could make people cry. And, people were saying why it was making them emotional watching it. And I had to, like, we did some of these dances, and the relief of getting through it and knowing we'd done a good job. Me and Diane was me dancer partner that I was dancing with. I'd have to give her a hug on the dance floor and just keep hold of her till I knew I could talk. I think we got to about episode 11, 12, and we did a Viennese waltz to Metallica, and just everyone was crying, and I started crying on live telly, and I couldn't stop for a week. It was knowing that what it was, connecting with people like that, you know. And my attitude was always take it 100% seriously. Don't pretend it's been my favorite show. Don't pretend I'm delighted to be there, because it took persuading to get me on it. Put 100% in. If people know you're committed and people know you're putting the work in, then I can get away with undercutting the show. And I think that's what worked as well, is I took the mickey out of the judges. I didn't take any crap off them. And as soon as those dances were over, it was an entertainment show for me, you know. Mm-hmm. So all in all, it couldn't have gone better. But as you said, with the people forgetting that you're blind, we did a Charleston, which is a comedy goofy dance. And we had a joke at the beginning of that, where we're in a hot air balloon. And I get a Diane points over to one side, and I get a telescope out and look through the telescope, and then I'm like shaking my head because I think it's broken, and I'm banging this telescope. Yeah. And then I hand her the telescope, and she looks out of it, and I step out of the hot air balloon, start dancing in the clouds, and people watched it, and then loads of people on social media said, I didn't realize the joke until I watched it back, because I forgot that Chris was blind.
Wow.
That's exactly, yeah. And I think, you know what? I think some of the emotion and, you know, just showing, hey, you know what? I'm actually a person. I mean, that all goes towards it, right? Having that emotion, having that joke, having that reaction to the judges as well. I think it just, people have got this image of what blind people are, or any person with a disability, haven't they? And I think they just got to see Chris there.
Well, they have, yeah. And so, you know, I've always tried to, you know, represent myself and, you know, us lot really in as normal way as possible. And, you know, I'll do jokes about being blind, and I'll do jokes about, you know, when I'm on panel shows, there's always visual components to panel shows. And so, you know, you have to acknowledge some of these things sometimes, and, you know, undercut the show a little bit or take the mickey. But I always try and keep it to a minimum, and because there's more going on in your head than just being blind, isn't there? You know, there's more going on in your head there's always more going on in your head than just the one thing that people think defines you.
Of course.
And so that's what I mean. If you can make people forget, then that's better for everybody, isn't it?
Well, that's the thing I often say, right? I often say, look, there's so many aspects to my life. I'm not the blind guy. You know, I'm Stephen, first and foremost. That's it, right? And then everything else falls beyond that. Other people might want to pick you up on the blindness, and, you know, we all know about that. Taxi drivers are the classic, you know, forever getting the how many fingers and have you always been blind, and, you know, all this stuff. You get it all the time, right? And that's just par for the course. But is there a line to tread when you're on television? Because I guess there must be, well, I don't know, you tell me. I just wonder, in your head, are you always thinking, right, okay, I can make a joke about blindness, I can maybe make another joke about blindness, but is there like a limit? Is it like, okay, once I've done 4 blindness jokes, is that enough before people start to just think, oh, here he goes again about the blindness? Is there a line you got to tread?
There is, yeah, and the line you've got to tread is I'm not in charge of the edit a lot of the time, you know. So if it's not my show, I'm not in charge of the edit. So you've got to be in control of the edit as much as you can, which means only give them don't give them too much and hope that they'll take half of it out.
Right.
Only give them enough as you would be happy to be in the edit, because then you can't watch it back and go, God, there was a lot of blind jokes in that, wasn't it? Well, I shouldn't have said them. So yeah, you've got to keep it to a minimum, and you've got to pepper it. And ultimately, you know, it is also me. It's part of me. So it's ridiculous to ignore it. And it's ridiculous, you know, if something is funny, to say, I'm not going to say that because I don't want to acknowledge my blindness, because it is part of me, and it's nice to let people in, and it's nice to show that there's a level of comfort there. And I heard what you said, you know, about we often do these jokes to put other people at ease, and we do, but we also do these jokes to put us at ease, you know, and to make us feel more comfortable with it.
It's true.
But also, I think that it is important to put people at ease, because there is a level of people can be nervous around disability. People can be apprehensive. That you've had these conversations so many times about what words you can use, what words you can't use, and I think by being funny about it, you are almost, I think allowing them to think of it in a way that they might have thought was not allowed. And I think that's healthier. That's and I know people might disagree, and they might think, well, you just you're selling yourself out in terms of your disability, and you should be more proud as a But no, I think we've always used comedy to deal with difficulty, haven't we? In any walk of life.
Are you proud of being blind, Chris?
Don't start him off, Chris. Don't get him on the blind pride thing.
I mean,
never shut him up.
I'm afraid I'm with you on this one, but listen, you can be proud of the way you handle your disability, and you can be proud of the community, and you can be proud of all of the things that make your life easier and support you, and the things that you've accomplished. But you can't be proud of being blinded as a thing itself. So I get both sides. It's one of those things, my father-in-law was a psychotherapist, and he dealt with couples, and he'd always say that couples would come in and they'd have arguments about whether the house was tidy, and well, I tidy the house, and she says it's not tidy, and she goes, it's never tidy. And he realized, both of you define tidy, and they both had completely different ideas of what tidy was. So we can argue this point till the cows come home. And what you need to say is define pride. And what we'll realize is everyone's talking about a slightly different thing, and kind of we all agree a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's so true. That's so true.
It's true. Humor does it sort of diffuses attention, right? The awkwardness. And I think you're absolutely right. There's some. I mean, I still have interactions today where people just can't speak. Because I know someone's there, and it's almost that they just don't know even how to kick off the conversation. And humor does help with that. I think you're absolutely right. There's nothing wrong with making your own life easier to some degree as well. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if somebody's there and they're not making a noise and I don't realize they're standing there, I'll flag them on it, and I'll say, you got when I wasn't going to notice you were there or something. Because you make them, if you can make them feel a little bit uncomfortable about their just stood there silent with a joke, the next time they're in that situation, they might make themselves known.
But it's interesting. I think a lot of people probably think, especially in our community, in our world of people who I think have gone through that process of losing vision over time, everybody I speak to thinks that they're the only person that's gone through this. And then when they listen to shows like this and they hear us talk openly and honestly, and they hear you talk openly and honestly about what it's like and the reality of it, I think first off they think, wow, that's amazing that happens to other people. But then I think they would go a little bit further with you, because they might think, well, hang on a minute, you've been on television, you're famous, you're still getting the same reactions from the public that I get, and it's like, but yeah, because for some reason we just haven't broken through that yet. We haven't broken through. I don't know if we ever will. I think that's why we have to.
Do you still get the same reactions? Have you noticed a difference between before being famous and now?
Or did the bodyguards take care of that?
Yeah.
Well, my tour manager is actually a black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but he's never had to use it.
He met Sarah, though, the other night, didn't he?
He did, yes.
He needed to use it there.
Do you know what? Like, it's, I think because of the way that I've been able to put myself across on the telly, which is very approachable and very, I hate to use the word, but I do use it a lot, normal. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And the only reason I use the word normal is not because, generally speaking, blind people aren't normal, but because the general wider kind of attitude towards blindness is that we aren't normal. That we're not as normal as them. Do you know what I mean? And that's where the problem comes from. So I try and represent as normally as possible, and I find that the interactions with people who've seen me on the telly have become a lot more natural and a lot more comfortable. And I hope that me being on the telly and doing these things as well, in some way, just filters down a little bit and lets other people interact with people with disabilities just a little bit more naturally and casually than maybe they might have thought of doing in the past. That's a pipe dream, but yeah, it's it does it has had an effect, and but I'm on the telly and I do all these things and people think, well, like I must be like really capable. I have all exactly the same Like I was talking to somebody about this yesterday. Like I could travel around the country and do comedy clubs. I've done this for over 20 years, and I could play to hundreds of people in comedy clubs. I'm on tour now doing, thousands of people in rooms. I can't go to the shop and get a loaf of bread. The anxiety of that situation is too much for me. There's things that we all struggle with, and for me it's the little things. The big things are not a problem because I've spent 20 years doing them, but the little things for me, Uber Eats and Uber and Amazon have literally eliminated my need to go to the shops ever again on my own, which is fantastic because I hated it.
Yeah,
hated it.
Do you know what? That is so cool that you say that, because I was there in the audience when you did your gig, and it was thousands of people, applauding and cheering, and it was amazing. And you were just sat there, and you were so comfortable, and just seemed so natural up there. And you think, to hear you say you still get anxious about going to the shop,
honestly,
it makes me okay, yeah, even you.
2,000 people in a theatre, and I'm at home, But whereas you could very easily find me having a panic attack in the bread aisle of Marks and Spencer's food,
Yeah. Well, that's Marks and Spencer's. How does the other half live? Someone's doing well.
I've given myself away there, haven't I? It's the closest one to my house.
Yeah, that classic.
I'm a Netto.
I live in Surbiton. We've got a Marks and Spencer's food, a Waitrose, and the lowest budget one we've got is a Sainsbury's. I'm sorry to say, but
you deserve it. Yeah. Well, I want to go back to, it's the same sort of thing, really, but about representation, right? Representing the blind community, or however you want to phrase it. Because Stephen is very much I don't represent anyone. Not one person can represent a community.
I barely represent myself.
Yeah, of course. Yes, you can barely dress yourself.
Yeah, that's true.
But the point is, does that change, though, when you get to a certain celebrity? When you do start...
What are you saying, Shaun?
Well, do you know what?
Yeah, we're not at that stage, Stephen. Let me quash that delusion right now. But you do recognise that you do represent. You have got some sort of responsibility on your shoulders, or do you not?
So Stephen doesn't represent blind people, and when he says that, you often refer to with your opinions. Mm-hmm. It's your email, it's your it's your Twitter bio disclaimer. These are the opinions that Stephen's got. Yeah. So you don't and I don't represent blind people with my opinions about blindness or anything else. But I am aware as well that there's probably a vast majority of the country have never had exposure to anybody blind, right? There's way over half. I don't know numbers. I'm pulling numbers out of my head here. But most people, I would say, do not have daily interaction or any level of exposure with someone who's blind.
100%.
And so, to see somebody on the telly who's blind, that is their exposure.
Yeah.
Right? And so by me portraying myself as quote normal or quite relaxed about it, able to talk about other things apart from being blind, being able to be funny about other things, making people forget I'm blind, and then suddenly they're remembering and going, oh yeah, that guy can't see. That's good for me. That's good for for my idea of providing that exposure. And it would be mad for me to think that doesn't happen and that isn't a thing. So so that is representing in a way. And if I'm honest with you, I've done this for so long that I never saw that at all until people would mention it to me. And it was on my last tour where I'd meet people after the shows, and people who were blind had come to the show, and I'd meet them, and they would say how much they appreciated how I was, representing them on the TV. And it was not something that I'd considered until people started saying it to me, and I became very aware of it in that respect. So I've it is, there's no getting away from it. But it's important to me that it's done positively and capably.
But, it's interesting, we talked earlier about going on Strictly and is it ticking boxes? And there is another problem there, which is the TV producers, once they've had a blind person on, and the previous year, I think the girl who won was deaf, or I think she got into the final. I can't remember. Rose, who won last, or got into the final last year.
Yeah, I mean, partially deaf. I'm not competitive, but partially deaf.
Okay, fine. But oh, no, don't start the partial thing, because I just, that sets me off as well. But look, the point is that once it feels sometimes like the producers, I think in their heads, must think, okay, so we've done it, we've done that, we've done blindness. So the idea of another blind person coming along next year to Strictly Come Dancing, or this year now, might not happen, right? And that's where the problem lies, I think, that they are pigeonholing these issues. They are creating the tick boxes. Ideally, we want more Chris McCauslands out there. We want more people out there. You almost want, when people go on a panel or a discussion to talk about blindness, you want a range of opinions and views. You don't just want one blind person to be the voice. That's the problem, because that then puts a lot of pressure on you individually as a person on TV doing that, because it's almost like, well, he is the blind representative on earth, which doesn't seem right to me.
Look at it this point way then. The lady that you're referring to was an actress on EastEnders, and she was deaf, and she won Strictly X amount of years ago. What was it, 3 years ago, 4 years ago?
Was it as far back as that? Yeah, okay.
Maybe 2-3 years ago, somewhere around there. And on this series that I was just on, we had Tasha Guri, who was in Love Island and is deaf and has got a cochlear implant. And it was barely mentioned as a thing.
Yeah.
Because it was no longer a new experience. It was now just, she's just on the show and she's got hearing problems. And so, within that world, that's a considerable change from the initial representation and how much everybody went on about it when the initial lady was on, Rose. So it might be that there's nobody blind on it this year or the year after, but in 3 years' time, somebody might be on it, and it won't really be as much of a talking point as it was when I was on it, because people are more used to it now, and that's how you get places, isn't it? You can't.
It's gradual.
It is gradual, isn't it? You got to drip feed this stuff, and it's. Also, I did set the bar very high, So
Stephen, when you're on next year, doing your Highland fling, we'll see how you get on.
Yeah, can you imagine?
There you go.
No. I'd be like, is it John Sargent that was on one year? It was just like Anne Widdecombe, I think, back to those. That'd be me. That would be me. Listen,
it's all good.
I've got to ask you about the RP, because you two are, of course, RP brothers.
Correct.
I'm not part of this club. I'm just sitting here with my optic hyperplasma or whatever it is that is wrong with me. Look,
Something's right, Posh.
I wish. Sounds like some form of it sounds like a massive telly, doesn't it? let me just switch on my optic hyperplasma.
Yeah, I could sell that. That's a brand. Get that sold to Sony. But you've had RP. Now look, I guess RP comes along. I don't know as much about it as obviously Shaun does, because he lives with it. But is this something from birth, or is this part of life? How does it work for you?
Yeah. So it's, it's always it's hereditary, isn't it? So the genetic condition is from birth, but for some people it kicks into gear at different stages of life. Mine was from birth, so
it's not lies dormant for a while.
It's for some people, yeah. Whereas mine's dominant, so if you 50-50 chance of passing it on, and if you don't pass it on, it can't be passed on again within that line, and it kicks in straight from birth with the deterioration. So mine deteriorated steadily. I would say steadily. I'm writing about this at the minute, actually, and I've been trying to figure out a way of putting this across, because it was almost like. It felt like the deterioration accelerated, but I think that's just because the further you get in the progression, the more things you stop being able to do. Do you know what I mean? Like you stop being able to see the screen, watch the telly, go out at night, play football, all these things, and so it feels quicker. And I think what I realized when I was trying to find a way of explaining this is that I think it deteriorated steadily, but I think for every kind of 20% that deteriorated, it took 20% off what I was able to see in terms of the distance, what was out there. But it also whacked the 80% that was left out of focus by 20%. Do you know what I mean?
So too many numbers in there for me, Chris.
Yeah,
I'm a simple man. But I totally understand what you're saying.
I think my distance shrunk in as what I had started going fuzzy. And And so it feels like it's getting worse and worse as it goes on. But I can't. People go, when do you go blind? You go, well, it's hard. What do you mean? It's hard to say, isn't it? But probably early 20s, you know.
Yeah, a lot of the time I was referring to myself as blind. We've talked about this as well before on the show. You know, sometimes for the sake of other people, because it makes it easier to say you're blind rather than, I've got bad eyes. But it's so difficult. And as you say, with RP, it's so individual on the speed of, sight loss, when it's going to happen. Some people lose it early, some people over a real spread out time.
But I avoided the blind word. I completely avoided it. I wouldn't like the way you say that you did it for simplicity. Obviously, I think you lost your sight, obviously, quite more recently, didn't you, in terms of all the useful stuff?
That's right. Yeah.
Whereas mine was early 20s and late teens, early 20s. And I was so unaccepting of it and so resistant to the idea. I would really try to, I was not comfortable with it at all. And I would use any other word than blind. I'd even say things like, oh, I'm blind as a bat, because it just kind of made it a little bit more
softens
playful. It does, yeah. And but then other people, just because that is a turn of phrase that people use, they think you can see a lot more than you can. It doesn't get you anywhere, does it? It's, but there's just a complete level of denial and resistance, especially when you were at my age, losing my sight. And it took a long time to kind of acclimatize to that. And as you guys have said in the past, and I'm a complete believer in this, it's you can't say this while it's happening, but once you've gone blind, it becomes easier than the 5 years that preceded it.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
But you can only really say that in retrospect, I think. You can't begin it going, oh, I hope I'm blind, because that'll be easier. But it does become easier when you look back.
But you don't know how much of the troubles that I had, that acceptance, was because of that denial. If I had simply embraced it at the start, but I don't even know if that's possible, to make your life easier by saying, because while you still got some usable sight, you use it. And it's really difficult. Was there a point where you said, this is actually easier? Can you pinpoint it where you thought, actually, because I always think I've been dreading this event happening. It's always been there looming, in the future, you're going to go blind. And you sort of, you never really process what that means. And, but when I actually got here, I think, actually, I feel a kind of relief. It's strange. Did you have a moment like that?
Yeah, but you know what it is? Is that when your eyesight is deteriorating, the goalposts are shifting. And so you are always struggling. You're always adjusting. You're always trying to cope with something that isn't good enough for the job. And there's no plateau for you to get used to. And you're always playing catch up. And so you're never going to be good at it if you're trying to survive on something that's diminishing. Yeah. And when you lose your sight, you suddenly end up in a world where if you do anything, if you try and learn any skill and you keep on doing it, you'll get better at it. And for the first time, you're actually learning to do things now in a way where you just start getting better at things rather than worse at them. And that makes that makes the difference, doesn't it? When you can see. No one would go to the gym if every time they went to the gym they felt they were worse at it than the time before. We need to experience that improvement and that progression. And you go blind, and it's horrible to say, but you suddenly start getting better at being blind, whereas you were only ever getting worse at being partially sighted.
It's funny how we all end up on a different path, but we all end up in the same place. I mean, my experience was that, I was told repeatedly by doctors that the condition would never get worse, nothing would ever change. And, that had embedded into my family. So whenever I would talk to my family about it, and I would tell my mum about my vision getting worse, she'd say, well, it can't be getting worse because the doctor said it wouldn't happen. And I'm like, yeah, but that was 30 years ago. They knew nothing back then. They probably didn't know where the sun went at night back then, right? So, what do they know? And now, it's a case of, well, it did change, and it wasn't just because of the eye condition, although it had a part to play in it. Of course, the problem is they don't really know what caused it. They just know that it happened. And so I kind of faced it in a way I wasn't expecting to. I kind of always was used to this level of vision that I had, which I kind of coped with. And then suddenly, boom, 1 year, I'm like, that's it. Now I have to relearn everything. And I remember you're saying about getting emotional. I cried after sending an email. And I must admit, I was using Outlook, which is, tough as the rest of the time. So, I've explained it. But, just that one action, that one thing, it was so important to do on my own. And I talked the other day about this, about, getting the Weatherspoons app and trying to find a meal in this restaurant app, which was inaccessible and it was hellish. And I kept thinking to myself, I just want to do it. And my wife kept saying to me, no, it's okay. I'll just zoom in. really close. I'm like, never mind, Luke. Never mind zooming in. I want to do it myself. Yeah. It was just that thing, and it is you kind of place the success of your life on tiny, tiny little victories. Getting over the front door, getting to that accessible app, getting through the checkout at Amazon. Whatever it is, just doing that thing, getting to the end result. It's a very small win. But it's huge for us, and that's these little wins, I guess, help towards what is eventually acceptance.
It is, yeah, and this is why AI is the biggest game changer in blindness in my lifetime. Really, maybe apart from maybe the iPhone, because we use it through the iPhone, but we rely, the way you said you didn't want your wife zooming in on the thing. We rely on people for so many things, and the people that we rely on don't always want to help us. Your wife was offering help there, but you want to buy something off the internet, and you have to show somebody the photograph to get them to describe it to you, and they're in the middle of, my wife's in the middle of watching CSI or something, and she's like, oh God, you have to look now.
Yeah.
Well, it's horrible to say, but AI never runs out of patience with me. It never.
Nope.
It's only the ones closest to us that say that as well. My kids are always saying, oh, God, what now?
Absolutely. And so, this is why, technology is important to us. And there are things like these Weatherspoons apps that, on face value, if only they saw them for what they are. They're not just a way of reducing their staff numbers and freeing up space at the bar. What they've actually got there is a form of accessibility. By allowing people to order drinks without having to find a bar, they've got a form of accessibility. And so to make it inaccessible is it's the most dumbest thing, because they don't appreciate what they've got. They don't appreciate the system they've created. They've made accessibility inaccessible.
Yeah, that's right. And actually, the thing is, the very thing that, as you say, makes it more accessible for us. Because, as simple as a menu in a restaurant. I told the story the other day about this, but, the end result was I just bought a burger, because that's what I do. I just buy the burger because it's the safest bet. It's probably on the menu. There's going to be some version of it. And, I think, okay, that'll do. And it's just the that'll do factor that annoys me. But there just are moments in life where you think, no, I just want to do this myself. I just want to be able to do this myself. It was like, I remember using Be My Eyes for the first time after buying my wife a birthday card that said happy anniversary. Now, that could have been a lot worse. Let's be honest. It could have been with sympathy. It could have been
commiserations.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It could have gone horribly wrong anyway. But, this was a mistake. And so I decided the next time to use Be My Eyes. And the same thing, I was in tears in the card shop because I was able to buy a card on my own. And again, it seems nothing to most people. But these are the everyday realities, and it's the everyday things that nobody thinks about that are huge wins for us when we can do them ourselves. And we do depend on other people, but it's I think it's getting the dependence in the right way. And that's why something like Be My Eyes, Ira, Seeing AI, whatever the app is you use, I like the ones that give us the human contact, if I'm honest. I know the AI is good, and I do think it's good, but I don't trust it after, I don't know if you heard the episode where I talked about the cheesecake incident.
I didn't hear that one, though.
So I went to a restaurant and I was quite excited. I like cheesecake, but the thing about cheesecake for me, Chris, right, is that I like normal cheesecake. Then I said
listen to the passion in his voice.
Yeah,
he's literally gone up a gear.
I know.
But it's like, right, I don't want any of this strawberry covered or honeycomb or crap all on top of it. I just want a simple vanilla New York style cheesecake. That's all I wanted. And I asked Be My AI, does this menu have cheesecake on it? And it said yes. And it said vanilla cheesecake. So I thought, fantastic. So I asked the lady when she came over, I said, would you mind if I had, well, I didn't say, would you mind? I said, can I have, why would I say, would you mind? I said, can I have cheesecake? And she said, we don't have cheesecake on the menu. And I said, well, this thing says it does. And she said, well, it doesn't. And so I was deeply disappointed. And at that moment, Chris, I decided AI was hopeless. And I refused to trust it when it came to cheesecake.
How did you know AI was wrong and she wasn't wrong?
That'd be quite funny, wouldn't it? But I don't.
Yes.
I kind of assume she would know, right? She could see the menu for a start. But but in all seriousness,
Maybe she thought you'd had enough cheesecake.
Yeah, there's probably some truth to that.
Hey, I was too polite.
When you're at a bar and you ask a pint of lager, please, I think you've had enough, sir.
Yeah, although in my case, it's cheesecake in life. Yeah, too much in life. That's the problem. But look, I mean, that's the point, right? It's like there's so many tools and things out there. We will rely on them, and we should.
Yeah, and it has to be. This is the problem: is it has to be as close to 100% reliable as possible. Otherwise, it almost becomes unusable because you can't trust it.
That's right.
The problem with technology, software and hardware, is there's always iterations, and there has to be a pathway. And you can't just jump in already done. I mean, this has been kind of the problem with glasses and smart glasses, is that people aren't prepared to wear huge, cumbersome prototypes on their face, the general population. But it takes a while to refine technology down to a point where it works, and that you can get everything small enough and fit it into the package. Yeah. Whereas glasses was one of those things that we kind of just need it already done. You need to do all this behind closed doors and just let us know when you've got some sunglasses that work. And we're not prepared. We're not prepared to go through those 5 versions with you and walk around with huge things on our head. And we have the same relationship with a lot of stuff that we rely on. It kind of just needs to work. But we do need to accept as well that the capabilities of it are so revolutionary that, if we can work with it to get it to the point where this margin of error reduces every year, then, the difference it makes already with the 15% error margin or whatever it is already so profound. That I'm prepared to have I'm prepared to eat a cheesecake if it tells me it's a bolognese. I don't really care, I'll put up with that every so often.
Well, you've dragged
you're on
us
your own on that one.
You've dragged us round to tech there, Chris.
Well, someone has to.
Thankfully, well done, you.
Mr. F will be on the phone in a minute.
I'm going to ask you what tech you use in a minute, but I want to talk about your past, because you are into your tech. You are a bit of a nerd, aren't you? Let's be fair.
Yeah, well, my degree is in software engineering, so I did computers and maths GCSE. I did computers, maths, and further maths A level, and I did software engineering at uni. So I'm a geek down to the core. I'm a programmer. But as I said in the show, my degree's so old, it's like having a degree in medicine from when everything was leeches. So it's
we did computing before. Well, I did before Windows. I mean, we found out that we had the same computer teacher at college. There.
Yeah. We did. Yeah.
Yes. So that's how long ago it was.
Back in the old Turbo Pascal 7 days, when that's what we were.
Yes, exactly right.
Was I not alive then? Let me think.
Calm down. But so what technology do you actually use today? You mentioned the iPhone, right?
Yeah. So everything I use is really just the iPhone and the Mac. Really.
Yay! Now you're talking.
No,
I knew he was a good
on.
guy. I said to you, didn't I? I said Chris is a good guy, and now
my mate Chris.
Yeah. Well, he's my mate Chris now. My mate Chris, the Mac guy.
Well, do you know what? So I used to use Windows, obviously, right the way through until 2009. Guess what happened in 2009? The iPhone became accessible.
Yeah.
And so I used Windows. I used Zoom Text for a while. Then I used JAWS for quite a while.
Yeah.
And then the iPhone came out. Now, the iPhone was it was problematic. And that first iteration, but they improved it on every update, and I think they listened to feedback. I used to email them in all the time with lists of things, and a lot of it would get done. I don't know whether it was because of things I was sending in or whether it was just them finding them anyway. But the experience improved so rapidly that I thought,
were you a bit like us at the start? Because I remember at the beginning, Shaun and I had both said, "Oh God, this is it. That's us. We're locked out." As soon as the iPhone came along, I thought, there's no way this is going to work for us. How can a sheet of glass work with? And look, it wasn't the first iteration of this. I mean, there were other attempts. I remember Sony Ericsson. I had a P800i, which I don't know what the I stood for. I don't know, but it stood
Yeah.
for. But
We're not coming up with one for you, Stephen. We're leaving you there. You come up with
leave me hanging. Thanks, guys.
Well, we were so used to the days
terrible.
of the Nokia N95s and Talks or Mobile Speak or whatever. You know,
Well, that was the only option, really, wasn't it?
That was it. Yeah, and it's certain models of Nokia phones, and you know, you had to go in with your list. Yeah, exactly. And then touch screens came out, and we knew because everything went touch screen. And it's just, how could that possibly be accessible? And the iPhone was a change.
If I'm honest, when the iPhone came out, it didn't even register with me. I didn't acknowledge it. I wasn't aware of it. It passed me by because it was so not for me that I didn't even give it the time of day. And I just carried on using me Talks on me Nokia. And it wasn't until I didn't know the what was it, the 3GS?
3GS.
I didn't even know that this was something that was going to happen. It came out, it had voiceover on it, and I just heard people talking about this touchscreen phone that was accessible, and I went and listened to some podcasts, and it was intriguing, and I went and got it, and for 6 months, I was like, this is so much harder than using my Nokia, but I feel excited by it. And I feel like I've been let into a club that I wasn't previously allowed into, you know, because this is something I've just been and bought in the shop and turned on. And I'm allowed to use this. And I put up with all of the bugs and all of the difficulties in telling who was phoning before I answer the call. And you know, and I put it with it because I felt almost privileged, like they'd opened the doors and allowed me in. And as I say, it got better and better. Never looked back. Went to the Mac, and you know, I'm one of these people that I prefer the Mac, but I use the Mac for, you know, my work is all very basic. You know, I do a little bit of audio editing. I do a little bit of, I do writing. I do a lot of looking stuff up, and you know, and I get the point of the PC, and I understand the benefits of JAWS and scripting and what that can give you access to and the customization. And but you know, for my needs, I just love being able to have the latest, sexiest thing, you know, and flick it open. And just honestly, I just stroke my MacBook Air sometimes. I just sit there stroking it. Yeah, it's lovely, isn't it?
You two are weird.
I've got to say though, look, I've got to say, it's the opening the box experience that I love. I love that smell. I could sit there for about an hour sniffing the box.
I love the speed that the bottom bit drops out of the top bit.
Yeah,
you know, if you just hold it and it slowly just lowers itself out.
Nice on the floor.
But shall I leave you two alone or something? What's going on?
Do you know what? Do you remember the candle? Do you remember the candle?
What was the candle?
They had an apple scented candle, so it smelled, I guess, like opening a MacBook box that was on fire. I don't know what that smells like, but that was the candle.
I don't remember it, but there is something about that kind of PVC, whatever you call it, you know, the plasticky smell. That is, it's the technology equivalent of a new car, isn't it?
Yes,
you know,
that's right. That's our new car.
Yeah, and it's it's a lovely smell. Do you know what? I mean, they should do them, shouldn't they? I mean, if what's her name? What's Chris Martin's wife called? What's her name called?
Gwyneth Paltrow.
Yeah. If Gwyneth Paltrow can get away with selling the candles, she gets away with smelling them. So we can.
Yeah, I agree.
Let's leave that one there.
You know, the only piece of you can edit this. The only piece of specialist technology I actually have is I have the old pen pal, the RNIB pen pal.
Oh yeah, the pen friend.
Pen friend. There you go, the pen friend. And I use that because me and Shaun talked about these the other day, and he was like, "Oh, you're not one of them, are you?" I have a lot of vinyl. Oh
yeah.
And I love vinyl. I love the weight of it and the whole, just the tactile, the active nature of putting a record on. And I love music, and I like the fact it annoys my wife. And and so I have all me, and I like looking after it. I have all my vinyls in these polythene sleeves, and then I put the little stickers on them, and I record me little notes on them, and I can go through them. And that's the bit of specialist tech I have.
That's brilliant, though. I know you'd think this is ridiculous, Shaun, because I talk about my CDs and he thinks I'm an idiot for having CDs.
There's a thing called streaming now.
Oh, forget it. It's so pathetic.
So easy.
No, it's hopeless. Because, look, you can have access to 75 million songs. What do you end up doing? You listen to this last 10 songs you listen to over and over again. And bereft
it's
of music.
disposable as well, isn't it? It's disposable. You give something 13 seconds and you go next or whatever.
That's exactly what I do all day.
You've only got access to what's in your mind. You've only got access to what you can remember that you want to ask for. Whereas, you can flip through things and go, I forgot I own that. Let's put that on. And, it's quite a price to pay just for a little bit of a surprise every so often.
So listen, this is not my question, but someone asked me because they knew I was talking to you, and they said, ask Chris if he commits everything he does to memory. Because obviously, I imagine some comedians will have notes around them, or written something on their hand, or they'll have something on their arm, or even just a note on the floor or whatever as they're working. Are you committing everything to memory? Have you got any kind of note taker in the background going on, little Olympus DM 770 in the background? Playing away.
Most of the time, it's all in memory. So if I do something like, have I got news for you? A lot of comedians will take on a sheet of, a few pages of notes and jokes, and they'll have it hidden slightly underneath, and they'll glance at it and see what they've got coming up. I'll do the work, and I'll read the papers, and I'll write a load of stuff, and then I will instantly forget half of it. But it makes me feel better going in knowing I've got some stuff in my back pocket to use. But what I find is that the benefit of that is I'm not reading anything in front of me, and it frees my mind up, and I listen more and I engage more. And I think that a lot more of the comedy comes from stuff that I hadn't even thought of anyway, just by bouncing off everybody else, because I'm not there with any form of notes going on. So I will write stuff for these shows, but I will forget most of it and never use most of it. And a lot of it happens in the moment. And so I do all that just from memory. When I, I've got a radio show that I do, which is a panel show, and it's a comedy panel show, and I host that, and I have the script in front of me on a laptop, and I have the obligatory one earphone in, and the panel show's improvised, so everybody around me is improvised, and they don't know what's coming up. I'm bantering with them, but I have the script in front of me, and I read out the key kind of framework of it as it's saying it in my ear. So 95% of it is just from memory, and every so often, when needs be, I have a system that I will use for something like that when there's an actual bit of script that needs following. But when we did like the film and you learn a script, everybody learns a script. That's just something you do. It's not different from me, really. So when you're doing acting or anything, you just do what everyone else does.
Yeah. That's a skill in itself, though, right? Being able to listen to something without your face just going totally blank, and being able to speak at the same time. I don't know how you do that.
It is. Well, it's something we all get used to, and it's detaching your mouth from your ears. You get used to it, and it's like a drummer getting his feet going differently to his hands, isn't it? And we did. So when we did, I hosted this show over the summer. It was a chat show on ITV, and I hosted that. Now I was the only person that had ever hosted like that slot or anything like that really without the auto cue. There's always an auto cue going with the questions, and they glance over and they read the questions, and I didn't do any of that. So what I did was I went over the questions that we had, and I boiled every question down to one or two words. So if I was going to ask them, I had Paul Whitehouse on. I know, he was Paul Whitehouse is a comedian over here, and he was talking about Only Fools and Horses the musical. So I just had Only Fools written down. So we were talking about his fishing show, and then the producer at some point in my ear would just go Only Fools like that, and I go, so Paul, you've been working on the Only Fools and Horses musical. You were part of right now. How's that been for you? And I'm not reading the question. The question sounds better just coming out your head as it naturally comes out, but the prompts are there. You know what I mean? So,
and you're actually listening to the answer as well, right? I mean, it's
yeah.
Because I imagine a lot of these presenters are so busy getting so much information in their ear at the same time, as well as trying to read notes. Are they really listening and really engaging? Whereas I think you probably do it more.
I think so, yeah. And a lot of them are actually reading questions word for word, and they can sound a little bit more stale and scripted sometimes. Some people are very good at it, but I just find that for ease of not having too much going on in my ear, I just boil these things down, and someone just gives me a prompt, and it reminds me, oh yeah, we're talking about that next.
So what's next? You're, you've done very well for yourself.
Taking over the world.
Yeah, Bad Tidings, of course, at Christmas, which was brilliant on Sky and on Now TV as well, and just a fantastic show. A fantastic film to watch, and of course, just watching you this past year. Where does it go from here? What's next? Is it Hollywood?
I'm just on tour until I die, I think. I'm just. I mean,
He
I'm
means on
tour.
stage, obviously, not physically dying.
No, I think physically. I mean, physically. I think I'm on tour until one of two things happen. Either I drop dead, or I'm in a room on my own and no one's turned up. And I think when one of them two things happen, either the tour promoter will go, "I think we pushed him too hard," or "I think we've exhausted the possible audience out there." No, I'm on tour till May next year, and what am I doing? I'm writing a book, aren't I? So I'm writing a book, autobiographical about getting into comedy, losing my sight, and doing Strictly and all that stuff. So I'm trying to do that while I'm on tour, and we're gonna try. I think we're gonna try and get a quiz show or a game show off the ground over the summer for BBC or ITV or something like that. So that'll be the next thing to have a go at, really.
That's
so we'll see. Watch this space, see what happens.
Yeah, listen, Chris, it's really been great spending the hour with you, and I'm sorry we ate into your book writing time. Please go off and stroke your MacBook Air for us, and come back.
I've been stroking it this last hour while we've been talking.
MacBook Air, yeah? Yeah, okay. Right. Thank you,
now.
Chris.
Thanks, Chris.
Honestly, what a pleasure. Cheers, guys.
That is it from us today. Thank you so much for listening, as always. We'll catch you next time.
Thank you. Bye-bye.